好的演讲者都知道要带进一些幽默，但是讲个好的笑话就够了吗？在今年的 Mark Twain Prize 有很多大牌的喜剧演员都来恭喜今年的得主 Jon Stewart。在他们的演讲当中啊，观众们一边听一边笑，一边含着泪水，他们到底是怎么办到的呢？ Let's have a listen。Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管与沟通力的 Podcast。I'm Sherry, an educator, certified coach, and style enthusiast. 我相信专业有效的沟通是语言跟逻辑的完美结合。
And I'm Nick, a startup consultant, corporate trainer, and late-night gaming junkie. I believe great communication requires the right mindset and solid frameworks.
我们希望带给大家职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。
Join us each week as we share our experience, research, and methodologies to take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast. A few months ago, some of the biggest names in comedy stood on stage and gave tribute to Jon Stewart, most famous for hosting The Daily Show. These are comedians who are extremely well known for their comedic timing, their acting prowess, and their ability to stand on stage. But a few of the speakers really stood out in their tributes, and there's a few tricks to why. Today, we want to share with you what made Steve Carell and Dave Chappelle's speeches stand out among all their peers when honoring Jon Stewart.
那可能台湾的朋友啊，对于这个 Mark Twain Prize 比较陌生。那 Mark Twain obviously 他是一个非常著名的美国小说家 ，a novelist, and apparently he's very witty and funny.
Yes, there's a lot of humor, what we call a humorist.
Okay.
Usually there's a lot of satire, they comment on the times, but it's not like stand-up comedy, ha-ha, funny. It's more along the lines of reflective, but there's a lot of wit and humor built into the way that they write.
这个 Mark Twain Prize 呢，它几乎每一年，但是我知道去年它好像因为 pandemic， 所以他们并没有举办。但是每一年他们都会去颁给一个 comedian， 那这个 comedian 他可能是主持人啊，或者是喜剧演员也好。那其实过去有非常多得奖得主 ，like Ellen DeGeneres,
Will Ferrell,
yeah, Bill Cosby, but 好像被退奖。
That's gone. But a lot of other late night hosts like David Letterman, for example, has won.
So, 那今年呢得奖这个得主就是 Jon Stewart。Jon Stewart 可能大家还是有一点陌生啊，他在台湾没有那么的有名。但是呢，我们今天要来讲的这个 focus 并不是在他身上，而是在他朋友们这些，他们都会邀请大概7、8位吧。不同的人，那这些也都是很著名的一些 comedian， 然后来到这个讲台上面 and do pay a tribute， 就是给 Jon Stewart。那今天我们特别要来讲2位，那这个第一位就是 Steve Carell， 那再来就是 Dave Chappelle。
We specifically chose these two because they have this really great ability to have a very sincere tribute into the case where, it will bring up emotion. Yeah. Sherry talks about how they can make you laugh and cry all within 1 minute or 30 seconds because they found a good way to mix their humor with having a sincere, genuine message. Now, what's interesting is there's 2 ways that they were able to do this. One was the format in which they were able to tell their story. And they did that differently. Steve Carell has a very humorous format to start, and then he has a very heartfelt moment at the end. Dave Chappelle is very good at weaving back and forth between these 2 things. But from a speech and presentation perspective, something that they did that is a sign or a hallmark of every good presentation is they had one key point that they kept coming back to. And whether that key point made you laugh or whether that key point made you cry just depended on the context. But it was something they kept coming back to.
So 第一位呢 Steve Carell 大家可能就比较了解了 The guy in the office, the voice of Gru from Minions, right?
Yeah, he's been in tons of different TV shows, movies, pretty much a household name at this point.
所以他在讲有趣的事情，或他的幽默就是他每次他的脸都看起来非常的 serious. He has a serious, genuine face when he says something really funny, and that makes it even funnier. 那刚刚 Nick 有讲，他们其实很厉害的部分就是在这个简短的 speech， 他们都还是有一个主旨，一个重点 one key point. 那他不管在讲任何的之前发生的故事，他可能讲了3-4个故事，都跟这个 key point 很有关系。I think his main idea was to talk about Jon Stewart as a leader because he used to work for Jon Stewart.
So you hear that, as you said, throughout all of his stories, whether it's making fun or whether being serious, he just pushes back to what was Jon Stewart like as a leader?
Yeah.
Why did they trust him? Why did they want to follow him? And in his funny stories is why did they want to follow him into doing ridiculously stupid things?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, 他就讲到了他，因为 John 要叫他去采访一个很 like a scientist, right?
Yeah.
That or like eat something that you're not supposed to eat. 所以他有很多这些蛮好笑 story, but he always go back. 他的一个结尾都是回到说 he is a perfectionist and he told me to do this, so we had to get it done. 但是我觉得，但是他后面呢又很巧妙的去带进了一个很感性的一个话题。
And what's impressive is his speech is only about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And the first 2 minutes is him telling a lot of jokes.
Yeah.
And then he makes this transitionary sentence where he says, as much as it pains me to do this, I have to be earnest for a minute. And then he goes into this very serious speech about watching Jon Stewart comment on the aftermath of 9/11, the terrorist attack in New York City, and how Jon Stewart was willing to break the silence, go back on air, and talk about it.
Yeah.
But that was back to his leadership. Like he was a person that even though it was supposed to be a comedy show, they were on Comedy Network.
Yes.
But this was about something hopeful. It was about something that they had to say. And it was honest. And that inspired Steve Carell for the rest of his career.
Absolutely. 所以在这个那么简短的时间，真的是让我真的是又笑，然后又好感动。因为我觉得我们最主要想要来做这个单元，是因为想要让大家知道，幽默不是只有一种，就是讲笑话就好了。不是说我们在上台演讲，我们一定要就是 tell a joke。这样就可以，然后马上就进入我们正题。Actually, 它可以一直持续的。This humor is a continuation, right? You constantly bring back to the main point. 所以其实参考他们的一些做法，可能会对我们的一些 presentation， 还有去找寻我们自己的幽默感，其实我觉得也是一个蛮好的一个方式。
Steve Carell does a great job of this as starting and ending. Starting with humor, ending with earnestness. And keeping the same message. Dave Chappelle teaches a masterclass on how to do both of these at the same time, which is admittedly incredibly hard to do. This is why, by many people, Dave Chappelle is considered one of the greatest comedians of all time, because he knows how to weave back and forth between a very serious story and then a very funny point. But he does something very similar to Steve Carell, where he has one key idea.
Yeah.
And that key idea is John is the most supportive person and he's always the first to respond. He's always the first person to show up when you need him. And he tells that across his career, from being a 17-year-old comedian and being, treated very well by Jon Stewart, who's 10 years older than him, helps him grow up in the comedy clubs, all the way up to during the pandemic when Dave Chappelle, who actively chooses to live in a very small community, and his community in the US was, the economy was really bad. People were like, homelessness was becoming a problem. So he wanted to do a comedy show to raise money and help give back to his community. And he said, Jon Stewart, first guy to show up.
Yeah.
No matter what's going on, that's the guy who you can rely on. And he has an 8-minute speech, and he does this amazing, again, a masterclass of going back and forth. But that point is always there.
And of course, Dave Chappelle, 他是
2019's
winner of Mark Twain Prize. So, 那他另外一个重点呢， 我们刚刚讲到了，他会提到 Jon Stewart 他是非常 he's an amazing supporter， 而且他都是第一个会来回应你的人。第二个就是 he is the lead-in for Jon Stewart's career.
Yeah, so when Jon Stewart was on The Daily Show, the show that came on before Jon Stewart was The Chappelle Show. And so he makes a joke a few times throughout it as well that the whole reason Jon Stewart, was so successful is because Dave Chappelle always came first. So when even though he gives tribute and says, you deserve this award, he goes,But you had a great lead-in.
Yeah, exactly. 所以他就会用这种幽默，但是又是 heartfelt 感人的故事，就是穿插这个全场。So again, it became something that I laughed and I cried and then I laughed again and I cried again. I think it's just very touching.
And back to that idea, as Sherry outlined from the very beginning,Having humor is not the point. People say tell a joke or open with some humor.What makes the difference between just telling a joke to tell a joke and really tying your joke back into your speech is that idea is that when you're funny, it's not just to be funny. It's that it makes your main point, that key idea you come back to, even easier for your audience to remember because they've had so many emotions tied to this main point. It could be humor, it could be sadness, it could be seriousness, but that emotion is tied to the idea you want to give them.
所以我希望呢，大家能够多多参考这两位 comedian 他们的这种幽默的一种方式。我们真的不需要说我讲个笑话来特别去记一个什么笑话，然后就是在这个 presentation 讲。It's really about the whole entire presentation. 还有你的 style, your style. You be authentic and then you find your own humorous. I think everyone's very different. Everyone has your own style. 希望大家能够多多去，我们都会把这些连结放在我们的 show notes 里面。So go ahead, have a listen, feel it, and then learn from it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we really recommend going back through watching the 2019 speeches on Dave Chappelle winning and also the 2022 speeches when Jon Stewart won. There's a lot to learn both from the guest speakers and also the acceptance speech from both winners. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The Executive Plus podcast is a Presentality Group production, produced and hosted by Sherry Fang and Nick Howard. You can search us on Facebook, 主管英文 Executive Plus. You can also find us on Instagram, Communication R&D, and email us at sherry@epstyleplus.com.